began with reflecting on, we are given a paper on blank sheet with a question on that. If you set your priority, who the person you love the most, that is the one question, and what would have been your answer, right? How many of you thought it is God? You got the 100 out of 100 prize. The others got one mark less, 99 out of 100. In today's gospel, Jesus says something that can sound shocking at first. He says, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. When we first hear those words, we may wonder, is Jesus asking us to love our families less? The answer is no. To understand these words, we have to understand what Jesus is really saying. He's not asking us to stop loving our families. In fact, the Bible even says, honor your father and your mother. Jesus himself says, love one another as I have loved you. So we are absolutely called to love our parents, our spouses, our children, our siblings, and everyone around us. But what does Jesus mean when he says, whoever loves father or mother, son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me? He is reminding us that God must come always first in our priorities. Anything, anybody else comes after that. Because if we place anyone or anything above God, sooner or later our love can become possessive, self-centered, or fragile. In that sense, the person or thing we place above God becomes an idol, taking the place that belongs to God alone in our heart and mind. So here Jesus is teaching about the hierarchy of love. Yes, we love our families deeply, but we must love the Lord even more. We are called to love God above all things and above every earthly relationships. God is the source of love. Our family is His gift. Our children are His gift. Everything we have is His gift. And when we love God first, we don't love our families less. We actually love them more because our love becomes purer, more patient, more faithful, and more selfless. That is why some young men and women leave everything to follow Christ in the priesthood or consecrated life. In doing so, they don't stop loving their parents, their family. They still love their families. They still miss them. But they choose God first above everything else. And because God comes first, their hearts become freer. Their hearts become big enough to love thousands of people as their own family, serving them with the heart of a father or a mother. So how do we show that God is first in our lives? By living the first 3 commandments faithfully, worshiping God alone, honoring his holy name, never using his name carelessly, and keeping the Lord's Day holy through faithfully attending the Holy Mass, through our everyday prayers, and reflecting on his word. Every time we do this, we are saying, Lord, you come first in my life. Then Jesus asks another challenging invitation. Whoever does not take up his cross and follow me, he is not worthy of me. So what is our cross? Jesus carried the wooden cross, a big wooden cross, to the Calvary. Our crosses are different. For some it may be financial hardship. For others it is sickness. For someone else it may be lonely, anxiety, emotions, or a difficult marriage. Perhaps your son or daughter who has walked away from the Catholic faith. Maybe it is a spiritual struggle that you and God only knows. Different kind of crosses. And Jesus says, take up that cross and follow me. Then you will be worthy of him. If we share in the Lord's cross, we will also share in the joy of his resurrection. And finally Jesus says, whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And that is exactly what the martyrs did, right? The martyrs, they lost their earthly life, but gained eternal life. They considered everything as nothing compared with Jesus. And there is someone who lived up today's gospel in a remarkable way, and that was Saint Thomas More. Saint Thomas More. You know, he was a layman, a brilliant scholar who studied at Oxford University. He was an outstanding lawyer, a writer, and a speaker. Because of his wisdom and integrity, he became a close friend and trusted advisor to King Henry VIII. Eventually, the king appointed him the Lord Chancellor of England, making him the second most powerful figure in the entire country. But then, everything changed. King Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon, and began living in adultery with Anne Boleyn. When the Pope refused to grant him the annulment, Henry didn't like it. So he broke away from the Catholic Church and said, I am going to set up my own church, the Church of England, the Anglican Church, and declared himself the head of the church, and ordered everyone to sign the oath of fidelity, recognizing his authority over the church. But Thomas More could not accept that. He knew that obeying the king would mean betraying Christ and violating his conscience. So he resigned from his high office, even though it cost him everything, his position, his wealth, and his reputation in the society. And because he wouldn't sign the oath, he was imprisoned in Tower of London, where he spent several years. And during that time, he wrote beautiful letters to his wife and his son and 3 daughters. You can even Google it today and read those letters of St. Thomas More. In one of those letters, his daughter begged him, saying, Dad, please just sign the oath and you will be back to home. Come back to us, home with us. But Thomas lovingly replied, Dear, if I sign it, I may come home and live with you for another 5 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. But one day, I must stand before God. I cannot violate God's commandment or my conscience. And he never signed the oath of fidelity. He truly lived his faith to the very end, even facing death, Thomas More never lost his peace or his sense of humor. You know, as he was being led to the scaffold to be beheaded, he stumbled on the steps, and the executioner reached out to help him walk up the steps. Thomas smiled and said, "Well, I can manage the steps by myself going up. I will need your help on the way down." And Thomas More had grown a long beard during those several years in prison. And when he was about to be beheaded, he said, "Just give me 1 minute." And he took his long beard and put it on the other side of the chopping block. And he said, "Okay, tell Henry that my beard did not commit any treason. And so I want to make sure it is undamaged before his beheading." You know? Imagine that kind of fearlessness, courage, and humor in the face of death. And Thomas More was a true disciple of Christ who showed us practically that he loved the Lord more than anything on this earth, more than his powerful positions in government, more than his prestige, more than his wealth, more than his family. Yes, he loved his family deeply. He loved his country. He served his king faithfully. But when he had to choose between pleasing the king and remaining faithful to God, he chose God. His famous last verse says it all. He said, "I die the king's good servant, but God's first." I say it again. "I die the king's good servant, but God's first." That is the hierarchy of values. That is exactly what Jesus is teaching us in today's gospel. Love your family, love your job, love your country. Above everything else, love God.